Susan Hall. She said Wes Streeting of Labour, he's their shadow health secretary, put her in danger by claiming that a victory for Miss Hall in the London mayoral election would be a win for racists, white supremacists and Islamophobes. The Conservative candidate for City Hall, who was beaten by Sadiq Khan, said that the despicable comment by the shadow health secretary had led to her feeling unsafe on public transport, and she actually suggested he order an apology. Let's see what my panel make of this. I mean, Matthew, would you be comfortable telling Charlie Rowley he's Islamophobe, a racist, a white supremacist? He voted for Susan Hall.
No, I wouldn't, no.
I mean, so surely it follows that Wes Streeting ought to apologise.
I wasn't impressed by that contribution by Wes Streeting.
Was I.
I mean, I'm on a sticky wicket today. Both of these topics are relatively hard to defend, coming from a sort of left-leaning perspective. Because I think, as we were discussing, that Starmer's got himself into potentially a bit of hot water over the Natalie Elphicke adoption, as it were. And now this Wes Streeting story is gaining a bit of pace because Susan Hall has decided to come out now and say her bit about it.
We've got the tweet on screen here. Wes Streeting says, a win for Susan Hall and the Conservatives is a win for racists, white supremacists and Islamophobes the world over. He thinks we've got global reach. Susan Hall's campaign has been fought from the gutter with dangerous and divisive politics. London, we cannot let her win. Vote City.
Well, he doubled down on it as well,
yes,
Wes Streeting. He did. And he used some examples of racists backing Susan Hall. There's no doubt that there are plenty of racists who would have wanted her to win because they didn't want Sadiq Khan to win. But that language that he used, I have to say, I didn't support.
Well, I'm sure I could point out a few dodgy people that have voted for Sadiq Khan, right?
I'm sure there are. The question is whether it sort of reaches a tipping point or not. I think that Susan Hall was a weak candidate. I mean, I met her in a GB News context. She was very nice to me. I was astonished that the Conservatives chose her to take.
She's not going to be nice to you anymore, I have to say.
No, I'm not criticising her as a human being, but my job is to give you political analysis. Yeah. I was astonished that the Tories chose her as their candidate. Had they chosen someone with charisma and oomph, I mean, Khan might have been more seriously challenged than he was.
I'm afraid I wasn't available.
Do you accept that, though, Charlie? Do you think, actually, one, do you think Susan Hall was a weaker candidate? And secondly, do you think Wes Streeting ought to apologise for this incendiary tweet?
Well, I definitely think Wes ought to apologise. As Labour politicians go, Wes Streeting is actually quite good. You know, he does a lot of media.
He's got his politics stuff, isn't it?
Exactly, which is why I think it's below him and it's beneath him.
He's not in the NUS anymore. I think he needs to remember that.
Exactly, and therefore doubling down. You know, the first bit of criticism that he got about the flack of that tweet, then he decided to double down,
which is quite student politics.
That is very student politics, exactly. And I think I think if he was looking at himself in the mirror this morning, he would reflect and recognise that he's probably better than that.
It reminds us that you've got to be very careful with your rhetoric. When you're we have to be careful as media commentators, but when you are likely to become the next health secretary, when you are a very senior person in what looks likely to be the next government of this country, you do have a real responsibility to be careful with your language. And if you've made a mistake, maybe he doesn't believe he made a mistake. And as I say, I think a lot of racists would have voted for Susan Hall. But it's the point that it's suggesting that she is those things that I think is problematic, and then be big enough to say, OK, I got it wrong.
One of our viewers says you should. I think Streeting ought to apologise for his tweet. If he did, I wouldn't accept it, though, because apologies from MPs come easy. They're insincere. How dare he call me a racist, white supremacist and an Islamophobe? He should have lost the party whip. Would you go that far, Matthew?
No, I think that's going a little bit far. One thing that I did take issue with on the Susan Hall campaign, and I put it to her, was that she said, she was quoted as having said that Jews, and I'm one of them, are or should be afraid in Khan's London.
Well, many of them are.
And I think, actually, the quote was that she should be afraid of Sadiq Khan. Now, she said to me that she didn't actually say that. They should be afraid in Sadiq Khan's London. My worry was that was somehow coupling together Sadiq Khan, who is constantly attacked by racists and Islamophobes for the fact that he is Muslim and suggesting that somehow he's anti-Jewish because he's Muslim. She would say she was intending no such thing, and she would also say that some Jews, and this is, I'm afraid, true, are scared in London because of these marches.
Well, but this goes to the point about security, because where there are many people of whatever religion that feel unsafe in London for whatever reasons, and we can debate those, the point that Susan's making is that she feels unsafe now travelling on public transport on the back of Wes's tweet, who, by the way, had people... they didn't turn up to his house. They thought that they'd turn up to his house, this eco-mob.
Yes, which is appalling.
Which is appalling. So he would know better, or should know better, having had this eco-loons turn up to what wasn't his property, but they said that it was, that they were outside his front door. He knows only too well, as an MP, a Member of Parliament, as a shadow cabinet minister, the threat that they're all under, the threats that they can face by people of the public. So the idea to tweet something as crass as he did and to put Susan in this now very unsafe position because she feels scared to take public transport, I think that's just something that politicians have to...
from him, were you, Sir Keir Starmer?
No, I would, if you are wanting to be, as he continues to tell us, obviously the next Prime Minister, but former Director of Public Prosecutions, someone that is always fair and someone that talks about justice, because that's what he wants in many things, I would ask him to talk to Wes, or if I were him, I would talk to Wes and ask Wes to apologise, because it's quite clear that tweet is unacceptable.
I would say, can I just quickly say, maybe he was feeling defensive on behalf of Sadiq Khan, who it is absolutely, there's no doubt about this, has received horrific racism and himself has to go around with security simply because he happens to be Muslim.